Hello and welcome to another Lord of the Rings Rise to War video. I'm the player who plays as the King Under the Mountain, and today is the final day, thankfully, of the Mega Server. Admittedly, for the second half of the season, because of a few things that happened, I haven't been playing as myself. I've been playing, as you can see, as Neveries. I've also been piloting a little bit of lore, which has been quite nice. Being able to play some Kraken accounts is always good. So my accounts kind of fell by the wayside a little bit, shall we say, but it's been fun all the same. So I'm just going to go through potentially what might happen in the last 8 hours or so of this server. Obviously, people need 6 hours or so for Felfort, so it's going to go down to the wire, I think. Lots of stuff's happening in the centre. We are not in the centre, which is something that I will come on to when I come to the map. We're going to go through, the standard stuff, really, where fellowships are at, the story of the season. I'm not going to do a summary yet. I'll perhaps do the summary video afterwards. But I am going to give my opinion on this server and on future mega servers, I think, towards the back end is probably where I'm at. So, without further ado, let us go to the leaderboards. So, of course, this is the server which had Bear and Panda in Gondor, it had Lame and Order in Erebor, and in Angmar we had Toby, which is us, and Steppe, who have actually been a great kingdom partner, to be fair to them. Then in Arnor we had Merc and Gods. And I think the last time I did a video, Merc and Gods are pretty far out west, and a lot of stuff's happened since where we actually end up going over and trying to help out a little bit and kind of got them towards the centre and kind of tried to help guide the server towards the centre, which then in its own ironic way, we've ended up far away from the centre, but there you go. Sometimes that happens. Affluence-wise, Raven is way out in front with an extra 1,000, I would say, at 61k. Great effort from him again this server. I've farmed up to around about 13 with Neveries, which I was pretty happy with, to be honest. It means that I can run the type of formation that I'm running. I'll probably show a couple of battle reports later on. And no surprise to see Digger in third either. As for the merit boards, so you've got to think these accounts lay dormant for a little while. So I ended up getting back up to 37th. I think Law's in 60-ish. But 13.6 million merit from Raven. The man is a monster. I remember when I used to be able to keep up with him, and that is now a genuine problem. We have lots of Order in there. We have some Panda. We have Thumper in there from Lame, and Ricky Spanish in 5th. We have Dumbo, which is Matix in 7, Cutie in 8, which is an impressive effort for a bird formation. I don't think she ever plays ground units, so there you go. Zolo in 9, and Fellow at 10. And then if we just go through the whole 100 just to kind of show what kind of server it's been fighting-wise, and I suppose if you think nothing else, there is a small chance that everyone may end up 5 million plus by the end of these 8 hours. Unlikely, but there's a small chance that that might happen. So, but still, for the bottom of the 100 to be 4.8 million, it shows it's been a pretty reasonable server for fighting. Which, you've got to respect that, really, I think, is probably the key. I'm going to go into the map-ish, and then I'm going to go into the pins, and then I'm probably going to go into DG and see what's going on there. And then I'm probably going to talk about this area down here and kind of talk through, really, why the game itself needs a bit of a revamp around the centre, I would say. So, anyway, we've got a couple of pins out in the west between Steppe and Unaffiliated. We have some small pins up here between Order and Luff and Lame and Luff, and then we have Rune and Luff up there as well. We have a really small pin down here as well with Mordor, who did take a land back, to be fair to them. So let's go through it then. So we've got Toby and Steppe in Angmar. Let's not start with us, actually. I'd probably finish with us, is probably the key, or I'll put it in the right order at least. So Erebor currently own the ring. They are defending from Arnor, and they are defending from Gondor. And the pins up here are us and Steppe, a little bit of Toby, but it's mainly Steppe. So we've split our forces. We are attacking Gondor down here because we had no other way of fighting Gondor without having to fight Arnor at the same time as well. And we are fighting Erebor at this top crossing. So we've kind of split our team into two. Toby in the south, Steppe in the north. Arnor are in this middle pin here, and I think they're in this pin too. No, they're just in this middle pin here. So you've got Erebor and Arnor mainly, with some Gondor mixed in, and this is kind of around the middle of Karas into DG, that sort of area. And then in the south, you have a smaller pin, to be fair, between Erebor and Gondor. In the very south, you have the pin that I'm currently involved in, and we are racing across the map to try to get to Edoras, which was kind of our goal, which is why we relocated down here. We came through Arnor lands, and tried to push them here. So there's mainly Panda down here. Bear have been there for the last couple of days. They have banked on us not being able to get to Edoras and kind of abandoned us with some small defences, but we've been uprooting some players, which will sort of mess up this ring a little bit in the centre. So they've kind of gone to focus into Dol Guldur now to try and take the ring. Same as Arnor are focusing in here, and same as Erebor are focusing on defending. Erebor have been the only team this season to have the ring, and they took it while everyone was messing around in the west, to be perfectly honest. So to try and talk through our current predicament, was the choices are really, with the way the map's designed and with this sort of effort here, is that we either had to fight Arnor here and Erebor, and then if we can get into the centre through the crossing in the middle of Karas, we could also fight Gondor. But the problem is, we'd always, say if we won this passageway into here, we'd always have Arnor at our back. The only other way Arnor could go is go through into Gondor, which they did try to do, to be fair, but they were splitting the forces for a while. And all really this was doing was allowing Erebor to just sort of hold the ring very comfortably. We were trying to attack Erebor at the top crossing. Logistically, the three entrances to Dol Guldur don't work for this kind of server. So we decided to make a decision that we probably were not likely to get the ring this season, if I'm being honest, and made a different decision to give ourselves a different challenge. And so we split into two. So Steppe decided to fight Erebor. We decided to fight Gondor, and Arnor decided to fight Erebor and Gondor. Admittedly, Arnor have only really started engaging Erebor in the last day or so, as the time has come down. Most of their time has been spent on Gondor, and to be perfectly honest, I reckon it's quite close between Erebor and Gondor, but I do still believe Gondor are the strongest fellowship. So this sort of reaction by us to come down here and obviously work our way through basically meant that Panda came down to us. So it sort of made the centre, Order and Lame, the both Arnor fellowships in Gods and Mercs, and then majority of the bears were here. There was a few bears down here, but I would assume there'd also be a few Panda up here as well. So it kind of made it fairer, I'd say, or more balanced in the centre, I would guess. Sort of creating a situation whereby fellowships could have actually faced off against each other in a kind of 1v1v1v1 sort of style scenario. Very difficult to do on this kind of server, like I say, but that was kind of how the map's gone. We are within a fort range of Edoras, but with 8 hours left and 6 hours to build a fell fort, it's going to be a stretch. This is kind of where we're at. Edoras is, I mean, don't get me wrong, we're having a good go at it. We've just got to get to the fell fort within the next hour or so. It's going to be close. But we are pretty close to Edoras after uprooting the bases. I'm just about to build a fort, which is why I'm here. And if I wasn't full on tiles, maybe, oh yeah, of course I have a 5-minute timer. Duh. So there we go. So I'm going to try and do that. And then I'll have range to potentially be able to siege the keep later on. So interesting times ahead for the last 7 or 8 hours. And what I like to think is, generally with the servers we've played in the last 5 or 6, they've gone down to the final hours. So it's quite nice to see this one also go in there. And this is where the main action is. So this is Dol Guldur. I'm not actually sure how I've got range here, to be fair, but there you go. So I can see small movements, not a lot. There's a lot of fighting going on in these crossings. Arnor are in this crossing and now this crossing, but it looks like Erebor are fighting back, I assume from this corner. Classic Erebor this season tactics. Very strong in one tile warfare. Can't fault them for it. So they're kind of holding that side. More interestingly, I suppose, Now, I know Gondor were quite close here, so Gondor are around this kind of area. Again, though, to be fair to Erebor, seem to be holding off okay. Where is Steppe in all this? Because I think this will also add a different dynamic and kind of show you how that works. So Steppe are also up here, and they have the potential to be able to uproot the Erebor bases. So Erebor is still having to defend here as well. So it's become a really interesting last few hours. It's a shame that you can't get 4 factions in the centre. But it's certainly making for... I don't know. If I was Erebor right now, I'd be a little bit twitchy. Also, if I was Gondor right now, I'd probably be a little bit twitchy about Edoras. If we take Edoras and Gondor took the ring, they would only have 4 capitals still, so they wouldn't get their main badge. Currently, I believe that there's 4 capitals here from Erebor, so the ring makes it 5. So they have actually got the badge at the moment. So it'll be interesting to see if anyone wins this server. Erebor have been very good. That's probably my take on where it is. If you're asking me to talk about the server, which I'm going to do anyway, but my main takeaway from this, and the danger I think of setting up these kind of servers in the future if they're repeatable over and over and over again, is that diplomatically it becomes very difficult for the same teams to deal with the same teams over and over and over and over and over, because at some stage one of the teams is going to upset another and that tends to carry into future seasons. So I would definitely 100% say that affected Arnor's and Gondor's relationship this season. I would 100% say it also affected ours and Gondor's relationship this season as an Angmar and Gondor. What Lame and Order do very well is they keep themselves to themselves. So they don't really get involved in any of the drama. And it's kind of led to the situation that they're in now. But my main takeaway is if we're going to do these repeatable seasons, unless everyone just wars with no diplomacy, which is practically impossible, to be honest, it becomes very difficult for the teams to deal with each other once they've got to a point that they've annoyed each other. So I do think there needs to be some space in between, or maybe 2 of these style servers, for example, and you bounce from one to the other, mixing different teams in each time. So I think that's kind of my main takeaway. My other takeaway is 4 factions doesn't really work. I think you've got to either do 6. I don't think 8 works. I think 6 is probably the way it would work, just so that each entrance to DG is contested in its own way. The way this server was split was heavily from a farm point of view, split in a manner that Erebor and Gondor were always going to get better early farm. And I do think, again, it was talked about, but perhaps not to the level of it probably should have been, to make it seem a little bit fairer for everyone and balanced. And I think it's hard to talk about balance, and I think it's hard to talk about organic nature in these servers, just for those reasons, because I think quite simply it's almost impossible to find balance, because someone will always not quite be as strong as someone else, I would say. One of my other takeaways from this is World Chat is a very bizarre place, and I think if you're going to talk there, you kind of have to be able to take the rough with the smooth. If you're going to dish it out, you have to be able to have it back, and I think there is an element of some people not quite able to do that. There's been so many mutes in this servers of people who are leaders, people who have not really said too much incorrectly, I would say, at that time. And that's quite disappointing in itself, because it's obviously a tactic to try and make sure that leadership is more difficult for teams within the game, which I'm not really sure is necessary. My other point is, I think it's okay to be stronger than someone, and I think it's also okay to be weaker than someone in this game. And I'm not entirely convinced how that seems to be a subject that's not okay to talk about, or not okay. It's kind of put into a toxic environment, because there's been plenty of times this season whereby some of the teams on the server have been called weak. And I wouldn't necessarily say they are weak. I would say they're actually quite strong teams, quite active teams. And I think in general, every team on the server has been fantastic in its own way. But just because they're not as strong as someone doesn't make them weak. And then if that then leads to a situation where people try and balance that out, I also think that's okay. But you're not going to get teams which are exactly the same strength all the time, just because of the way these teams kind of snowball into being super teams. So for me, again, talking kind of bluntly, I do think that the balance of power across the game in general, if the game is to survive a long period of time, needs to be more leveled out. And if that means that people start doing a draft system for players, which will be difficult because people like playing with their friends, if teams disband and go into different teams, or if the game itself puts in a power cap, for example, which would be very difficult to do, based around, say, an affluence level, for example, and your 100 players can only have a certain amount of affluence, for example, something like that. I'm not sure how that looks. Unless something like that happens, I don't see how you ever get a level of balance that people would like, because you were never going to get that. And to a point, activity can win out. So I would wager, and I don't think this is disrespectful to any team that I'm about to talk about, Angmar, I think, which is the faction I play in, are probably, from a pure power base, the weakest faction here. It'd be a very close sort of run competition between us and Arnor for that level of power. But all it really means is that your players work that little bit harder to try and get to places. You give away more merit, granted, but you kind of find different ways of doing it. There's no point in sitting at a pass, for example, against a team that's more powerful than you. You're never going to win that pass unless you beat them with activity. Even then, it's a struggle. If you can outmaneuver them, which the game's kind of cut back on the maneuver elements, really. Like, I think of DK in their absolute prime before passes, and their movement was just scary good, and it outplayed teams that were far more powerful than them because their movement was just that good. Pass mechanics have kind of ruined that, and I think the game itself needs to look at pass mechanics. Whether the pass expands over sort of both sides or not, I'm not sure, but it certainly needs something to look at it to make that a little bit more palatable for the players, I think. I personally, there's far more to talk about around these servers, and there's far more to talk about around the future of these kind of servers. I know there's one being set up at the moment, for example, with Yudes. Not sure who's going there. I won't be there, and I know our team won't be there, because at this second in time, we are not prepared to go through that again. I think there will still be previous relationships with other teams. People need to play people that are new every now and again. Like, we've hit the same players now for 3 or 4 seasons. It gets boring to run into the same formations over and over and over again. Hence why I ended up running Witch King formation on my account this season, to try and do things a little bit differently. So I think it's okay to create different servers. I don't think the future of the game has to just be, oh, it's a mega server or nothing. There are teams and there are ways that people will go about it. There will be boring servers as well, where big teams will walk over an entire server. Fine, that will happen occasionally. But all in all, I just think it needs a rebalance. But the game itself has got to take a level of responsibility for that also, I think. So that's kind of my talk about that. I do want to go into it in more detail at some stage, because I think it's important to do so. I now own that tile, so I better actually build a fort. And hopefully I've got 5 points, because then I can just literally, it's 3. I could have done with 2 more points, really, just to try and speed that through. But I'll get them at some stage, so it'll be fine. I will show a little bit of PvP from this account. I've been hammered the last few days, to be fair. I've been using a kind of fairly cheapish formation until yesterday, when I actually ran out of Marauders. I've been using 2 Marauders and 2 Bow Knights, and it's actually worked really well as the full mounted combo. This formation is pretty cool, and you know, Kieran in these fights is actually doing... This is consistent, by the way. This guy does... Deadly Monks does do similar levels of stuff in every fight. Time-wise, obviously, his conscription time is a lot longer, but realistically, puts up a really, really good fight. The gear on this account is stupid good, really, to be honest. It's got all the respect in all the right places. What I will say, and what it's been nice to kind of look at this, the debuff from Sauron, because of this extra focus, is actually really nice. And with using the agility set, the debuff comes on first. So even though you're slightly more squishy, your command isn't as high. If I just kind of go into here, the kind of levels that you're getting to people with. So 22% for the enemy, and we are on 12.9% for the Deceiver. Oh, sorry, that's Sauron. That's their Sauron. So where's my Deceiver? 17. I thought that was low. My Deceiver is 17.1%, and my enemy is 22.1%. That has actually felt quite significant, and I didn't know how I was going to feel about running the account like this. With that kind of focus stat, I've still got some unit defense. I'm still using a tanky unit. I'm still tanking. It still doesn't die as often as you would think, but it's worked quite nice. So, you know, there's some big players in these teams using some very expensive units. You know, I'm not displeased with this. I've got a unit counter I'm walking into some pretty big players, full refined uniques. I've been very happy with how this formation's performed for its cost, and I've been able to run it at full barracks. You know, there's lots of fights in here. This one was a little bit unfortunate. What I found was yesterday in particular, I just kept blowing myself up with Bjorn, which is something that I always kind of hate, but I don't know. It's, you know. But as you can see, there's been lots of fighting, and I have to say, I have been impressed with this formation and how it's performed versus other formations, to be perfectly honest. It's a bit of a pain if someone comes at you with full birds, because you can imagine that you're not quite there. You know, I mean, even this guy, I mean, the fact that he's called Colin, I just think it's pretty cool anyway. But this guy's no slouch. He's got, you know, a lot of very, very strong units there, which I'm okay with losses like that because of the time it takes to redo things. The Poseidon Kids account, another great account. You know, so I will be trying this kind of formation again next season, I think, and trying to work out maybe adding cataphracts in if I can afford. Maybe running one of these as a tier 2 bow knight potentially rather than a tier 3. I mean, the Patoff account's a great account. And we literally just walked all over it yesterday. So nice to see Dane. Dane's very much, I have to admit, been a struggle to play this season because of the amount of simply the amount of people who have been running so much stun and madness, and there is a lot of it now. But like I say, there's been a lot of fighting. The B team here is pretty nice also. He's got Z11 Shadow, Z1 Dane with full refined unique, of course. Makes me feel happy about life. And then unfortunately Trash Gallad, and you know, he still does a job. I hate to say it, but he does do a job. It's been good to play, and it's been a lot of fun. I've had fun this season to a degree. Do I think it's been the server that it was lived up to be 100%? No, I don't think so. And I think that's more to do with how people have treated the server as opposed to the server itself, and how it's been. The fighting elements have been very good, but I don't think it's possible for teams, it seems, at the moment to talk to each other in a manner that's quite pleasant, that would then allow you to play a different season with them, to say the least. And I'm all for banter, and I'm all for world chat banter, and I think people will know that about me. You know, I'm not going to shy away from a conversation or a comment. I will be sarcastic. I will do a lot of different things, but ultimately, I think people need to realise sometimes it's just a game and get on with it. I will do an update again tomorrow. I will probably, maybe later on, depending on what's going on, stream a little bit of the last hour, potentially. It depends if it goes into a damp squid, which it could do. But if not, maybe. So this is impressive, though, for last day activity. I'm always very proud of this. Last day activity, fighting towards something that doesn't really mean a great deal, apart from the fact that we've called it as a target. It's nice to see this many people here on that last day trying to get through there. And I think we've got, I would argue we probably need to cover this area in an hour, which is actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I mean, it's possible, which would give us 40 minutes to siege. I mean, pretty crazy that we've got to that point, really, but we'll see. As always, if in doubt, always follow your nose.